Hello everyone, welcome to polling day here in the UK, where many places are currently voting for who they want to sit in their councils. Naturally, I will be doing my quote-unquote civic duty later and actually going out and voting. Basically, my position is whichever promises to lower council taxes the most is the one that gets my vote. And as you will have noticed, I've not made a video on local elections because basically it's all local politics and I don't really want to talk about my local politics. Because I'm also pretty apathetic about it. As I say, I'm pretty single issue, just lower my taxes and I'll be happy. But Hope Not Hate is quite worried about people with my attitude, and it appears to not be particularly uncommon with people around my age. So they have this article, Political Apathy, the Poison That Could Deny an Entire Generation of a Political Voice. And it seems like a pretty standard and fair argument. How can you expect to be listened to when you don't even do the easiest and main thing to get your voice heard in politics? So they say, ahead the 5th of May local elections, Hope Not Hate research presents a stark warning about record levels of political mistrust and dissatisfaction among young people. As voters prepare to select their local government representatives in hundreds of council areas across the country, our poll finds that a majority, 58%, of the country's young voters believe that politics is a waste of time because nothing changes. Pretty based. For Hope Not Hate, this is hugely worrying continuation of years that the public feeling further and further detached from their politicians. Trust in political representatives and the political system more broadly has long been an issue, but has increasingly become the norm, especially amongst younger voters. So especially to viewers on my channel, your initial reaction might be, oh good, this means that clearly they are not satisfied with politics either, and so they probably want the end to this left-wing hegemony. Unfortunately, that's not generally how the young see it, because the Institute of Economic Affairs ran a survey of 2,000 people aged between 20 and 34 in the UK between the months of February and March of last year, and they found that 67% of them say they would like to live in a socialist economic system, 75% agree with the assertion that climate change is specifically a capitalist problem, nearly 80% blame capitalism for Britain's housing crisis, 72% support the renationalisation of various industries such as energy, water and railways, 72% believe that the private sector involvement would put the NHS at risk, and 75% agree with the statement that socialism is a good idea, but has failed in the past because it has been badly done. Basically, they're idiots and don't know what they're talking about. My favourite part of their research has to come with these two graphs. As you can see from the left-hand graph here, when these millennials and socialists were asked what is the definition of socialism, they were given two options, either the definition of capitalism, basically a decentralised economy with private ownership of property, and for some reason, these idiot millennials and zoomers only gave the correct answer about 40% of the time, and they either didn't know or gave the complete wrong definition over half the time, about 60% of the time. And then when they were asked the same question about what is free market capitalism, they gave the definition of capitalism anywhere between 50 and 60% of the time, and either didn't know, in fact more of the time they didn't know, then could actually give the answer, the definition of socialism. In other words, using these statistics, about 1/5 of the time if you're talking to a Zoomer or socialist about economics, they won't know what they're talking about and will also be trying to push for socialism, again despite not knowing what it's even about. So if these young adults don't even understand what they are trying to push for, of course they're going to be politically apathetic. They don't even know what they want. But anyway, political apathy is a core anti-fascist issue. When voters don't feel they have a stake in the political system, it allows harmful extremes to exploit the system. The populist right weaponise failing public trust to push their hatred through an anti-elite agenda. The far right thrives on low turnouts, a direct consequence of a system where voters don't think there is a point in turning up to vote. Now, as far as I can tell, this isn't true. It's only really academic agents crowd that say, don't vote, it's pointless. I believe Mark Collette thinks you should vote, Richard Spencer definitely thinks you should vote, and in fact voted for Joe Biden himself. These other, and I think it's fair to call them this, fringe groups, most of the time seem to be for voting, and will in fact most of the time vote themselves anyway, even when they say you shouldn't. So basically I don't know who they're talking about here because I highly doubt they're referring to AA. Moreover, it is not just political apathy that could cause low turnout in these elections. As many as 42% of people aged 18 to 14 are not even aware that local elections are taking place this week. If politicians and parties aren't speaking and listening to young people, and as our polling station shows, 69% of 18 to 24-year-olds do not think that politicians listen to them, then it's not surprising that so many of them are unaware of the election even taking place. Well, again, this is the problem. As mentioned before with the IEA's research, we seem to have a lot of millennials and Zoomers wanting socialism, and all they really mean is they want Jeremy Corbyn. But since he was absolute poison for absolutely every other demographic and lost Labour quite a lot of popularity, obviously he's been kicked out, but then they bring in an absolute nobody like Keir Starmer, who has the charisma of a wet blanket. And because these socialist types at every turn in their education and in the media are basically told that Tories are evil despite the fact they are basically Labour from just 10 years ago, of course they're going to be apathetic. They realise it's a two-party system, one of the parties is complete evil and the other kicked out their demagogue and replaced him with someone they just see as Tory light. So it's not really a surprise that this has happened. I mean, this is what happens when you completely miseducate kids on politics and just make them completely tribal. Hope Not Hate is campaigning to encourage those who have registered to vote to turn the tide and amplify the voices of a younger generation in politics. This polling is deeply troubling and demonstrates that young people are not being listened to. This generation have grown up under austerity cuts, chronic underfunding of education, and falsely concocted culture wars, so it is little surprise that they now feel apathetic towards politics. I love it. Because I'm not saying go out and vote. What they're basically saying is go out and vote Labour. Because it's fair to point out, I think, that Hope Not Hate was set up by Jo Cox's husband, and for those that may not remember or may not know because you're in a different country, Jo Cox was a Labour MP who was killed by a man who was shouting Britain first, and was probably a far-right terrorist, and I think it's fair to call him that. And so her husband established this organisation, Hope Not Hate, and unfortunately since then it's caused nothing but trouble for politics on the right. Because they're the type of organisation that will paint people on the right wing, even if they've done nothing wrong, as the worst type of peoples imaginable. And I've even got round to doxing some of these people, and basically ruining their lives. But I'm sure that's what Jo Cox would have wanted. But I think it's fair to point that out, because clearly here they are saying, don't vote for Tories, vote for Labour, or at least anyone in the Progressive Alliance. And it's just plain as day to see that. They basically told us in that paragraph. The NEU has partnered with Hope Not Hate to address the lack of awareness of local elections this year. We encourage everyone to get out and vote on 5 May. It is crucial that we make our voices heard loud and clear so that politicians of all stripes take notice of the opinions of our young people, says Dr. Mary Boosted, Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. Man, I can't believe an education union is out there making left-wing talking points such as the culture war being concocted and false, and that education has been underfunded, despite mean expenditure per pupil only rising since the mid-90s. So they finally get to some juicy stats. The poll of nationally representative sample of 1,010 18 to 24-year-olds living in Britain between 15th and 19th of April 2022, carried out by Focal Data, also found that the majority, 58% of people aged 18 to 24, think getting involved in politics is a waste of time because nothing changes. And I'm sure these 18 to 24-year-olds have tried very hard to get into politics. 69% of young people do not think that politicians listen to them, with only a small minority, 9%, feeling like they are being listened to. Now that one I can believe is true, because kids are idiots. Nearly half, 48%, think that more young people would vote in elections if there are better policies for young people. Of course, a good way to try and get better policies for young people is to try and contact your MP and let him know that policies for young people would include X, Y, and Z. But I'd be very surprised if any of these people know who their local MP is even called. Over a quarter, 27% of young people said they are unlikely to vote in the local elections, with 16% of respondents saying that they would be unlikely to vote if a general election were held tomorrow. And finally, 2/5, 44% of young people say that they are not satisfied with the way democracy is working. Yes, well, a lot of people do tend to say that when democracy isn't going in their favour. And to be fair, I'd probably go as far as to say democracy isn't working, but I go the complete opposite way of what most of these young people would say. These young people would probably say more referendums, more elections, more accountability, X, Y, Z. I'd say no, I think we need to get rid of universal suffrage and make it so that you have to earn your vote in some way. Starship Troopers was a liberal paradise, I stand by that take. But the article finally says for too long, young people have been left on the sidelines of politics that will affect them for generations to come. We cannot let apathy become the poison that denies an entire generation to a political voice. And you got to realise another reason they won't want the young to be apathetic is because they know that young people, as the IEA have shown in their research, most of them are left-wing socialists. Most of them will vote for the people that Hope Not Hate want them to vote for. So they're basically saying to them, look, go out and vote, when behind closed doors are saying, wow, we really need these people to vote because they'll vote for us. And if it was just this article, I'd probably just leave this and not even make a video. It's not really worth going over, but Hope Not Hate had to go an extra step. Just take a look at this video.
Do not vote in local elections.
Yes, a party political broadcast by the UK far right, and I have no idea who they are trying to parody here. Because it looks a bit like they're trying to parody Nick Griffin when he was doing his BNP party political broadcasts. But he wasn't there saying please don't vote, he was there saying please vote BNP. Anyway, let's see where this UK far right party political broadcast goes.
Hate politics and politicians, think they're all the same, so do we.
Yes, it appears that Hope Not Hate are actually saying that a lot of these Zoomers are actually far-right Nazis. Which, if they actually were, I think we'd have a much bigger problem on our hands. But no, clearly begging them in a little article didn't work, so they had to get actor Eddie Marsan, who's a pretty good actor and appeared in the Cornetto trilogy. They had to get him on camera looking specifically scruffy, because far-right people are scruffy apparently, and say to them all, either you go out and vote Labour, or you're all a bunch of Nazis like me. Clearly begging didn't work, so threatening to call them far-right Nazis instead is going to have to work instead.
So don't vote to send a message to those people that you don't want them anymore. We're not racist. It's just a coincidence that none of these people were white.
Man, I'm not being funny, but you got Priti Patel right in the centre there, and a lot of people on the right wing tend to prefer Priti Patel to Boris Johnson. I mean, honestly, when people criticise politicians, race barely comes up. It's always, oh, they did this, they're stupid, and I want them out. And my god, when stories come out that we have the most ethnically diverse cabinet in history, of course people are going to criticise non-white MPs in the cabinet. Most of them aren't even white. Genuinely, this is the cheapest shot ever. And it wasn't enough to say you're basically Nick Griffin if you don't vote, but now it's saying you're a racist too.
It's vital that you don't bother to vote so we can stop Muslims undermining our British way of life. Using flimsy cover stories like looking after our sick and old, or keeping us fed in a pandemic, or being good friends and neighbours, or winning multiple Olympic golds, or the Great British Bake Off. It's the Great British Bake Off. It says so in the Magna Carta.
So yes, far-right people are complete idiots and completely undermine the things that Muslims do for our country, because Muslims are all perfect, aren't they? So what makes this particular one really funny is that Eddie Marsan, after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, when people were pointing out that, oh, everything should be okay to joke about, Eddie Marsan came out with this. So comparing Charlie Hebdo cartoons to anti-Semitic Nazi propaganda doesn't hold up. Jews are a race, Islam is a religion, fair game for ridicule. Now, just to be clear, I don't agree with this. I think everything is fair game to joke about, but obviously a lot of people following Hope Not Hate are fence archaeologists, so this tweet just came out from all of them saying, oh, if you don't like the far right being mean to Muslims, why are you saying that being mean to Muslims for a joke is fair game? And I'm sure he'd have some great explanation for it, but he's not tweeted anything about it yet, which is probably the best thing he can do. But really, when literal churches and church graveyards are all being dug up and replaced with mosques, and Islam as a religion only really started to gain prominence in the UK post the 90s, yeah, you could probably fairly say that's undermining the British way of life. Though, to be fair, it is partially self-inflicted because a lot of people don't go to church these days.
Protect decent, honest British food like pizzas and curries.
I'm pretty sure even a lot of Indians say that British curries are British, because when we did have an empire, actual Indian food was really quite spicy. I mean, no Indian would say a chicken korma is an Indian dish. What we basically did was take a load of spices from India and make the Indian food quite a bit milder, and wouldn't you know it, the Brits loved it. But yes, pizza is Italian. I don't think anyone in the far right would deny that.
Do not vote, so we can protect our values from people like I can't even pronounce his name.
Yeah, no one has a problem pronouncing Sadiq Khan's name. People only have an issue with names, and it's not only the far right that have an issue with names, by the way, but people only have a problem when the names aren't spelt colloquially, and they also have a problem when it's about 10 syllables long. But I mean, as shown in my last video, Sadiq Khan undermines his own values when on one hand he's saying trans women are women, and then 2 months later when abortion's an issue, he's saying, oh, it's a woman's right.
So that we can take the rights away from every black person. Note that I said black person, because it's important to be respectable.
See, this is a thing I love. When people are trying to portray racists and things like that, they'll undermine it with things such as this. And they do this in TV shows too. They'll be like, oh, we're trying to be edgy. And it's like, oh, look, we're trying to be edgy and paint the far right as bad. But they won't ever say the N-word. And in this case, they won't even go as far as to call black people blacks or anything like that. And I'm really surprised that he didn't say, oh, apart from my friends, see, I've got black friends, I'm not racist. Because I really don't know who this is supposed to be parodying. I mean, okay, I know Patriotic Alternative. They are for repatriation, i.e. paying foreign-born people of first or generation descent to go back to their own countries. But, I mean, they say at the moment, and it's not in their manifesto to send them back by force. And Hope Not Hate should know this, because they constantly write articles about them and research them. So, again, I have no idea who this is trying to parody.
Don't vote, so we can send them all back, and their mums and dads, and send a message to the wishy-washy, bleeding heart, snowflake cuck lefties like the Home Secretary.
The Home Secretary, who isn't even white, put forward one of the most popular positions for the right wing in quite a while by literally sending people who cross the channel illegally, although it's just adult men at the moment, but she's planning to send them over to Rwanda. Unfortunately, they're hitting a roadblock with human rights campaigners trying to stop it, and they are being successful so far. But I mean, I think I get the joke. I think they're trying to say, oh, they don't realise that it's actually a non-white person doing what they want. And a lot of people on the right wing are like, yeah, we know. A lot of them even joke about how they think Priti Patel is a stacked arse. So again, who is this trying to parody? Because I don't get it.
Don't vote so we can send her back to where she came from.
What the?
And the gays. Let's just send them back. I'm not sure where that would be, but let's just send them back anyway.
Again, the most right-wing position is to oppose gay marriage, and they're not even against civil partnerships, because a lot of people on the right wing who are against it for religious reasons. A lot of people really don't care what the gays do in their bedrooms. What they care about is all these weird pride marches where you've got people coming out in fetish outfits and things like that. And don't get me wrong, this is much more problem over in America. But obviously when you see these patterns in America and you see the same patterns over here in the UK, of course you're going to be quite wary about it. Again, who is this parodying?
Do not vote if you want to help us shut down the BBC or other news outlets and chase down journalists in the street and anyone who disagrees with us or calls us racist simply because we're racist.
Yeah, again, majority of the right wing think that chasing journalists in the street is not a good way to go. And again, the Tories are stopping the BBC's licence funding. Nadine Dorries has done that. Like, again, that is a really popular position, so it doesn't make sense for right-wingers to go, yeah, don't vote. Of course, most right-wingers are going to say you should vote for the most right-wing party. Because if you don't, you'll get actual socialists in. And if you unironically think that Jeremy Corbyn should have just been voted in a few years ago, yes, I think you're an idiot. It's a lot easier to manage a slow decline than it is to manage a complete collapse. If you want a good example of this, just look to the Soviet states after they all left the Soviet Union and it collapsed. Russia collapsed completely and had quite a few issues. The rest of the states that managed it quite well ended up, in fact, increasing life expectancy and increasing quality of life in those countries. So just to make that clear, even if you think that the Tories are going to go through a time of decline for the UK, which honestly I can sympathise with that position, surely you'd want that over a complete collapse. Because a complete collapse could mean that a lot of people you love will die.
Don't bother to vote. Because first, we came for the Muslims, and then the blacks, and then the gays, then the Jews.
And then all the problems were fixed, so we stopped.
Then for you. But before all that, first people simply didn't vote.
Again, most people on the right wing think Hitler was the enemy and love Churchill. But don't get me wrong, there are fringe groups that do think the wrong side won in World War II. Don't get me wrong, quite a few of them are ex-BNP. And yes, I do indeed think these people are horrible, but I think their public discourse, like, that's a fine place to put it, because, again, sunlight's the best disinfectant. People see this and people think, no thanks, that's horrible. Because I've seen this in real time. Patriotic Alternative peaked back in 2020. and you barely hear about them these days, and the reason for that is because they tried groping, but they groped completely wrong, and were a little too loud on the side of, yes, we do genuinely hate Jews, and yes, Hitler probably should have won. And there's of course the infamous clip of Mark Collett saying, I think a book that should be saved and preserved for future generations to read is Mein Kampf, along with 2 other books by American white nationalists. And to try and say that in a country like Britain, where racism has been seen as quite a disgusting thing for quite some time, yeah, that obviously wasn't going to fly, so now no one really hears anything about Patriotic Alternative except through Hope Not Hate articles. But there you have it, that was Hope Not Hate, basically saying, hey, look at these young people, a lot of them are very politically apathetic, and then basically saying to them, by the way, if you're continuing to being politically apathetic, you're probably a Nazi. Which I just found an amazing thing to go through, so I did. Anyway, that's everything I had for you today, so as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.